The next game we're talking about is the Cotton Bowl between number 5 Texas, number 8 Ohio State on Friday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. You have Quinn Ewers and the Texas passing game against the Ohio State pass defense. So what should we be looking out for when the Texas Longhorns are throwing the ball?
Does this count as a Quinn Ewers revenge game?
Kinda. I mean,
count?
He handed the ball off 2 times in his 1 year at Ohio State. So
and that's all they let him do.
Yes,
yeah, it's definitely a revenge game for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Picking C.J. Stroud over him. How could they? All right, so the whole theme for me on both sides of this is going to be Ohio State and just their adaptability. Because when you have this much talent and then you have coaches that allow you to adapt into something new and make adjustments on the fly, you obviously got a really good thing going, right? So I'm going to talk about Jim Knowles and his coverage schemes, and this is something I teased during our Ohio State-Oregon review. You're seeing a difference in the coverages the last couple weeks. Obviously, you're playing against wide-open offenses like Tennessee and Oregon, and Texas isn't that much different. They get down and run the ball a little bit more with that offensive line, but I think the big thing that we're seeing lately, normally, Jim Knowles is his 3rd season now in Ohio State. Normally, you're in the Big Ten. You're playing a lot of single high, 1 and 3. You're stopping the run against most teams, pretty much against everybody except Oregon. Your first priority is to stop the run. Now, all of a sudden, he's balanced out these coverages, and he's playing cover 2 at the highest rate that he's played all season. Okay, 25.5% usage rate over the last 2 games. That's their most commonly used coverage, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider for most of the year they used it maybe, I think, in the low teens or maybe even 10% of the time, and it's structured differently. Okay, so normally in the regular season, what you were getting was the classic Tampa 2 look. You'd have Downs in one half, you'd have Ransom in the other half, you'd have Cody Simon or Sonny Styles running up the seam, and it's like a classic Tampa 2 like Monty Kiffin used to run, right? Right now, they're mixing it up, and they're preventing teams from taking deep shots on them, and they're preventing them from getting into those RPO throws over the middle because of the way that they're structuring it. So Jordan Hancock, normally their slot corner, the last 2 games, he's played 79 snaps at free safety. What they're doing is having Hancock play one half, Ransom play the other half, and Downs is this rover sitting at about 10 to 12 yards down the middle of the field between these linebackers, and he's at this depth where he can basically do everything. He can run support from there without being blocked on the second level, because you're not going to get a guard or somebody up on him 10, 11, 12 yards down the field, right? So he's a free runner in the box as a run defender, and then he's essentially, he doesn't have to read and get back in cover in Tampa like a linebacker would. He can just stand there and basically figure out what he wants to do. That's essentially Caleb Downs' role at this point when they run this coverage is, hey, sit in the middle of the field at 12 yards, do whatever you want. Just do whatever you see, because he's got just a super high football IQ. He's a true sophomore. He's going to be a future maybe top 10 pick. That's what we have with Caleb Downs. And what it's doing is disallowing deep shots. You don't want to throw anywhere near Caleb Downs, and it's helping in the run game. And your problem with Texas is when teams have committed to this and they feel like they can stop the run in too high looks. They haven't been great in against too high defenses this year. Against single high, they're the 5th best offense in the country. Against too high, they're 51st. And Quinn Ewers against cover 2 this season, not great. 55.8 passing grade, 3 big-time throws, 5 turnover-worthy plays, including, I think, at least 1 last week when he was trying to chuck it deep over it, and a 5.5-yard average depth of target. Just speaks to, okay, yeah, we've seen this in the NFL. It's gotten talked about so much. Teams going into cover 2 and so many too high coverages that they're making, great quarterbacks check it down. Same thing for Quinn Ewers. They're making him check it down, and if he's trying to throw into these tight windows, it's going to be tough, right? Occasionally, does he have the arm talent to make some of those throws? Sure, but it's also a gamble at times, especially when they haven't always had receivers this year who have separated vertically down the field, even though they have Isaiah Bond, and Matt Golden's done it lately, and that's going to be a big factor. But how much can Texas, if they get this look often, one, can they get into all those glance and slant throws in the RPO game with the linebackers playing a little bit wider and Caleb Downs just sitting right there waiting for him? I mean, right there at about 10 to 12 yards, just staring at the quarterback, just staring at him. I mean, Caleb Downs knows what he's doing back there. And then how often can they check it down and just keep kind of moving the chains, especially when you're talking about a run game that was great against Clemson. You're going to go over it. Was not great last week. And now you're playing Ohio State, who's got a raging hot run defense. You've got Sawyer, you've got Tuimoloau, you've got Tyleik Williams. Cody Simon's been fantastic all year. Lathan Ransom coming up and hitting Jordan James last week the way he did. I mean, that was just nuts. You've just got an Ohio State defense. We've talked about the offense a lot, and we're going to get there, but the defense is rolling too. Last week, Oregon, 20 carries for 33 yards. I mean, it's just I don't know what else to say about that other than they're just on fire right now. So they're going to have to figure out ways against this too high defense, either to run the ball or Quinn has to be very, very careful, especially with Caleb Downs roving the middle of the field.
Yeah, and honestly, to put the ball in Quinners' hands, you need to stop the running game first. And obviously, in that Clemson game, Quinners didn't have to do much in that game because of how dominant the run game was. He had to do a little bit more in the Arizona State game, and they almost lost that game. I'm really looking at Texas's outside zone heavy scheme against a Buckeye defense that's elite at keeping contained this year. So you better be running on the outside against Texas because they have just been running outside zone so much this year. Texas called outside zone on over 1/3 of their rushing attempts this year at 34%, 17th highest rate in the country. And outside zone, if you don't know, kind of designed to get the defense moving laterally, challenge the edge of the defense. And the running back's job is to find where it's kind of weakest on the defense, reading the edge defender and say, okay, if he's keeping it inside, I can bounce it outside. Or if he's setting the edge really well, I can bounce it back inside. That concept worked beautifully in Texas' first-round game against Clemson, which was a major reason why Texas won that game by multiple scores. But against Arizona State in the quarterfinal, it didn't work. And that's why I think a big reason why they squeaked by in double overtime in that game. Against Texas, they averaged .579 EPA per play in outside zone. Against Arizona State, negative .332. 249 rushing yards on outside zone against Clemson. 15 against Arizona State. 2 rushing touchdowns, 0 against Clemson, 0 against Arizona State. They averaged 10.8 yards per carry on outside zone against Clemson, 1.7 against Arizona State. And you may be wondering, okay, does Arizona State just play a lot better than Clemson? What happened there? They did. Another reason is Cameron Williams, their star right tackle, did not play in that Arizona State game, and he has been terrific this year on outside zone with an 84.5 run blocking grade. That's 14th among all tackles in the country. His backup, Trevor Gooseby, 251st in the country with a 52.1 run blocking grade on outside zone, 30 points lower than what Cameron Williams has done this year. Now, Williams did miss the Peach Bowl with a right knee sprain, but leading up to that game, he was at least a limited participant in practice. Maybe he could play in this game, and maybe he probably will play in this game, honestly. They'll probably need him, right? They'll probably need their projected first-round right tackle in this one against the Buckeyes' elite defense, especially considering how good Ohio State's been at containing outside zone this year. Ohio State leads the Power 4 with a 90.7 run defense grade against outside zone. They've only allowed .2 yards before contact on outside zone this year. Cody Simon, you mentioned before, he has been terrific this year. He is third among all linebackers in the country with an 89.9 run defense grade against outside zone. JT Tuimoloau leads all edge defenders in the country with an 86.4 run defense grade against outside zone. And Jack Sawyer is 6th in the country with an 82.4 run defense grade against outside zone. So you got 2 edges who are amazing at keeping contained this year. And then a linebacker in Cody Simon has done an amazing job at coming up and hitting the running backs as well. I can't wait to watch Kelvin Banks Jr., Cameron Williams, arguably the best tackle duo that we have in college football, against one of the best edge duos in college football, maybe the best, and JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer on these outside zone concepts, considering that's going to be a major factor in whether or not Texas can have anything going in their ground game.
I'll tell you what, it's why you love these playoff matchups. There's a non-zero chance that's 4 first-round picks.
Oh, yeah.
All in that matchup. And Williams, like every time I watch Cameron Williams, I just picture him in a 49ers uniform.
Yeah.
I do. I'd be like, that's perfect. Yeah, that'll be right next to Dominic Puni on that right side would be just nasty. But no, you're absolutely right. That's your matchup is Banks and Williams if he plays, or Gooseby if he doesn't, against Sawyer and Tuimoloau. And those were the 2 guys that I challenged last week. I go, listen, against Oregon the first time, you had your worst game of the season. They were really good in the second game. Obviously, it's tough to defend that team and all the spacing and everything they have. And Texas will be the same way. The difference is I think they're going to be less concerned than they were with Dylan Gabriel. Especially in the first game, it felt like they were trying to keep contained and really make sure Gabriel wasn't the option threat that he can be. Quinn Ewers really isn't an option threat. That's not how they run it. They're gonna run it from the pistol, and they're gonna just allow the handoff to happen, and they're just gonna keep contained. And the goal, as always, The goal in outside zone, as always, first is if you can turn the corner and get to the sideline, do it. Always get to the sideline if you can. But going to be tough in this game. Oregon, in the first game against Ohio State, with Ohio State playing so wide the way that they were, they shot right up and cut back into that B gap, and they got a lot of yards there, especially to Tuamoloau outside. That's the side I'm looking at, especially is Banks against Tuamoloau on that left side. That was the matchup that has given Ohio State issues, especially in the first Oregon game. He can make plays. Absolutely. There are times when he gets real aggressive. He makes some spectacular plays, but I think he's a little bit less consistent than Sawyer is. I think, especially if Williams is out, we already know, getting behind Kelvin Banks and running at JT, that's going to be a big, big key for Texas A&M, and then they can get some bootlegs and some play action going off of it.
Definitely. So you have the Ohio State run game that, Chip Kelly's notorious for his heavy zone scheme dome, but I think you found something different that Ohio State's been doing lately.
This is fun. This was, of the 4 things I get to do today, this was the most fun.
Didn't you stay up until like 2 a.m. finding this? Right?
I stayed up until a stupid late time the other night because there was a whole bit of sleuthing I had to do to get into why this happened. But first and foremost, okay, we're going into the playoff. We're Ohio State. We're embarrassed. We just lost to Michigan again. Everyone's teeing off on us. Ryan Day should be fired, blah, blah, blah. Everything's going on. The biggest problem that I think Chip Kelly saw was that, hey, we didn't run the football well in this game. And we've talked about for weeks on end their offensive line with the injuries just not being able to get it done. And if you're Chip Kelly is known as what? The inside zone guy. That's what he does. So he's with the Eagles, when he was with Oregon, UCLA, Ohio State, wherever he's been, that's what he's going to do. They're going to run inside zone. They want to run between the tackles, be physical, be up-tempo, wear the defense out. Can't do that with this team. You just can't. They're not running between the tackles. It's not how it's going to work with Ohio State. So I go back and watch their 2 playoff games. I go, okay, we ran the ball pretty darn well. What did we do? Did we just get better? Because that was my first thought watching the games relatively casually, like we were on the broadcast when they were happening live. I go, we're just blocking better. I mean, we know they've been emphasizing getting to the outside more so because they're a perimeter team now, run and pass, right? And then I'm watching the tape back again, and I go, oh, this is completely different. Where all of a sudden Ohio State's gone from we're a Chip Kelly offense to we're going to run counter. We're going to get in some gap scheme, and we're going to run a boatload of counter. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, oh, that's where this is. Think about Travion Henderson's touchdown against Tennessee. Counter. Think about some of the play action schemes, like I think both Jeremiah Smith touchdowns against Oregon. Counter play action. They've gotten into this thing now where they go, okay, let's do something different. Let's throw them off. Let's throw just a total curveball. In the regular season, they ran counter 10% of the time. And it was really just kind of like, we'll just mix it up just to do it. These playoffs, they're running it on half their carries. 30 out of, I believe it's 30 out of 61, they're running counter. For reference, okay, 49, 50%. For reference, for the season, USC leads the nation running counter at 38%. They've just gone totally into, look at this, 76.9 rushing grade on these 30 carries. 7.3 yards per carry. Oof. 3 touchdowns, 6 explosive runs. Now you're talking about a 20% explosive rate. The only 2 teams for the season that had a 20% explosive run rate on design carries were Kansas State and UCF, which we know what those 2 can do. If you're getting 20%, you went from the way they were blocking up front and running for 73 design yards against Michigan to now we're ripping off 20% explosive runs, which is elite stuff. And I'm sitting here going, how did this happen? This doesn't just magically appear out of thin air. So I go, like you mentioned, I go down a rabbit hole till like 3 a.m. I go, what is this? Because this isn't Chip Kelly. It's not. I'm like, okay, who is it? Is it Justin Fry, their run game coordinator? I'm looking into like backgrounds and all sorts. Was it Will Howard? Did Chip Kelly go to Will Howard and go, hey, what'd you guys run at K-State? And then I was watching it again. And I was like, I don't know about that. And I think I'm doing some real detective work here. I think I have our source. Do you want to know the man responsible for this?
Tell me.
Mike Norvell.
How?
Mike Norvell, let's turn it all the way back to his Memphis days. Okay. Remember that staff? He had Dan Lanning.
Yep.
He had Kenny Dillingham. He had all sorts of big-time guys now on that staff at Memphis. We're going back to 2017. Well, another guy he had as an analyst so far down the totem pole on their coaching tree because he had just hired him out of a high school in the Memphis area. A man by the name of Carlos Lachlan. All right, so far down the totem pole at Memphis that if you go to their 2017 football, the coaching staff list, he's not even on there. He was an offensive analyst, and then he did some high school relations and recruiting stuff for a couple years. And Carlos Lachlan, he was there with Mike Norvell in his first year at Florida State after Lanning and Dillingham had left, right? Goes and he's an analyst, he's a high school recruiting guy. He gets an offer to be a running backs coach at Western Kentucky. Spends a year there. Then Lanning and Dillingham, they're at Oregon. Lanning calls Lachlan. He goes, hey, come with us. Come be our running back coach with us. I just got the Oregon job. Okay? Spends the last 2 years there. For whatever reason, I don't know if it was a pay raise or what. Now, Carlos Lachlan is the running back coach at Ohio State. Under Norvell, a coach who's extremely famous for running a whole boatload of counter schemes and building an entire layered offense. Think about last year with Jordan Travis and that Florida State offense, right? Boatload of counter. Think about Oregon the last couple years. Boatload of counter, right? Under Norvell, Lanning, Dillingham, Lachlan, all of that. When you look at across 2022 and 2023, right, those schools I just mentioned, Memphis, Florida State, Oregon, all right? Across the last 2 years, they were numbers 1, 3, and 4 in their rate of running counter. They're not running Chip Kelly's offense. This sounds crazy. They're running Mike Norvell's offense because I think Chip Kelly had a round table with the whole coaching staff and said, how the hell do we run the football? And I think Lachlan was the one that stepped up and said, let's try Norvell's stuff. Let's try all this stuff that we used to do at Oregon and Memphis and Florida State. That's what it is. If you watch this tape right now, this isn't Chip Kelly's offense. Chip Kelly is calling Mike Norvell's offense with Ohio State personnel. And this is where we've gotten to where on these counter plays with an objectively pretty bad offensive line right now because they're banged up. We're running for over 7 yards a clip, and we're looking like we're going to win a national title. That's where, and so anytime it always comes to my mind when teams make big changes. This isn't out of thin air. Chip Kelly didn't just go, yeah, screw it. After 40 years of coaching, I'm going to run counter this week. Yeah, that's not how that works. No, but when you have that's the advantage though. Yeah. When you do have 3 weeks to prepare. Conference title week, they were sitting there brewing hot because they just lost to Michigan. 2 more weeks against Tennessee to prepare. And what do you think Tennessee and Oregon are looking at when Tennessee's watching tape all year of Ohio State running the usual Chip Kelly stuff, and then they come out on 3 weeks rest and they're coming out just running counter and running play action schemes off counter and shit that no one's ever seen Ohio State do before? What do you think Tennessee, what do you think they were thinking on defense? They're like, oh, what do we even do with this? Yeah. And then Oregon has...
Yeah, they didn't prepare for that.
And they can't. It's not there. It's not even in. What are we going to do? Now Oregon's sitting at the Tennessee tape going, okay, that was game plan just for them, right? There's something about Tennessee. No, they come out and dominate the same way. And then with the passing schemes, too. You know the deep touchdown, which I have drawn up on the board behind you, to Jeremiah Smith last week, the one where he was like wide open, right, and made it 21-0. Even the passing schemes. Florida State, ironically, against Memphis, they ran that same exact play for like a 65-yard bomb against Memphis earlier in the year. Same formation, same play, same everything. It was DJU's longest completion of the year. They're just ripping plays out of Mike Norvell's playbook, and they're taking it and running it with Ohio State personnel. And now my problem for Texas, you know what would stress me out if I'm Texas and Pete Kwiatkowski, which he shouldn't be stressed out with all the talent he has on defense, but it's not the stuff that I've seen the last 2 weeks on tape, which is really good. It's all the layers of this offense I haven't seen. They put in a brand new offense. Like the whole thing starting with the run schemes. That would stress me out as I go, what is next? Because I'm telling you, I've written stuff on this, doing Florida State previews in the past, especially last year when they were really good, where I'm like, there's so many layers to this. And for as much as I love now, you have the part where, and you've got this, we love Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, right? Great players at Florida State. This is Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka. Mm-hmm. And now you're running the play action schemes off it and the counter schemes with Henderson and Judkins, right? Who may both get higher than where Trey Benson got drafted last year. I don't even know with Ohio State. They put in a brand new offense in 3 weeks. And it starts with these counter schemes up front, and they're just killing teams with it. It's literally, I could attribute this to Mike Norvell, and that makes no sense at all. But it does when you think football's all about connections. And this is where we've gotten to with Ohio State, where Chip Kelly's calling Mike Norvell's offense and playoff teams have to adjust on the fly to it.
Listen, Mike Norvell should have been coaching in a college football playoff semifinal last year, and I know he's kind of coaching his Spirit right now in this college football playoff semifinal.
Well, look, Lanning, Dillingham, and now what I just explained with the Ohio State offense. He's got to be, if for the season Florida State has, Norvell's got to have some fun sitting back watching this.
Shout out Carlos Lachlan as well. I would just imagine you in your room, like Charlie Day from Always Sunny.
That's actually what I was going to bring that up. That's actually what it was, because there's always
going insane
when you have this with coaching staffs. There's always a reason. For as great as Chip Kelly is, he's not some magician. He didn't come up with this out of thin air. I mean, he wasn't just going to be there was no way an ideal. I was like, there's always someone on your coaching, and great coaches do that. They're going to consult the rest of the staff, and they're going to sit at a table for hours on end. I've been there, and they're going to go, what do we do? What do we do? Because clearly you hit a point, and give him a lot of credit. Chip Kelly had to have gone in after the Michigan game and looked at their run game and just said, we just can't.
Yeah.
We just can't. We can't. We are not.
And our running backs are way too talented for us to be this bad.
And for it's the exact reason I picked Tennessee to beat Ohio State at the time. As I look at that part, and I would say the same thing. I was like, they can't. They can't run the football the way they're running it right now. And in 3 weeks, they overhauled they're running Mike Norvell's offense, and they learned it in 3 weeks.
So just for all of our viewers out there who are, like, you keep talking about counter, like, what is counter? Like, what is it compared to, like, what they were running before?
Any scheme where you've got two backside pullers coming. It could be a guard and a tackle. Very often in today's game, it's a guard and a backside tight end. Just any scheme where you've got two pullers coming from the backside, because what it does is it actually makes life easier on the front side. And think about how much easier this makes a guy like Donovan Jackson's life at left tackle, who's usually a guard. When you're running zone, you have to make a lot of reads and decisions based on what's in front of you, based on, okay, I have to get this front side guy, and if he stunts inside me, then I have to go to the second level. It's like a whole 3-4 step process that goes into zone blocking, right? Which, if you get it down, then the rules feel very simplified, right? That's why Texas is so good at it, because you rep it over and over, and you get a million different looks, and every week you're just game planning fronts. When you're running schemes like counter, your front side guys especially, your job, if there's a guy inside, whip his ass. If there's nobody inside, go to the linebacker and whip his ass. That's simple. Down blocks are the easiest blocks in football, right? So at that point, then it becomes for the two pullers. First guy, you hit the first guy you see. Generally the edge guy, we're leaving him. Second guy, get up in the hole, hit the second guy we see. It's that simple. And if none of that works, the backs still have one or two cutback options, like we saw Henderson score on the touchdown against Tennessee. So there's different ways of simplifying it, but down blocks are always easier for offensive linemen. It's really like schemes like that in power. You would teach that. I've taught that to kids as young as 10 years old, because that's what they do. Coach, what's my job? Inside gap. Oh, okay, cool, got it. That's what it is at the college level. Nothing changes. Nothing about football changes as it just gets a little bit more complex. But it keeps it simple for the offensive line, especially when they're repping it so much. And then they have so many looks off of it that just absolutely kill you.
I love that. That was a phenomenal breakdown, honestly, with the Ohio State run game. I'm laughing at myself thinking about you just at 3 o'clock in the morning, just searching up every single.
Actually, it was exactly the Charlie Day thing, because I was just like this. It always comes from somewhere.
Yeah,
always.
I love it. All right, well, that was great. Another great matchup we have is the Ohio State receiving corps against the best secondary in the country. This is probably the most star-studded matchup of the entire season, honestly. Ohio State averaged .498 EPA per pass in their wins over Tennessee and Oregon. They averaged .273 the whole rest of the season. Something seems to have clicked for Ohio State in those two games. And that something is a 19-year-old phenom that they have in Jeremiah Smith. I didn't have to do too much research like you, Dolan, trying to find where this came from. No,
you had the easy part. Yeah.
This is a superstar.
So you get to do all the stuff that I just ranted about, and you have maybe one of the most talented receivers we've ever seen. That makes your life a lot easier.
That was a lot. Yeah. It was. You had to research okay, where did this come from? That's where
you were done with this. You were done with this in 10 minutes.
Oh, that guy right there. That's him right there. The number one recruit in the 2024 class. Listen, he's been great all year. All right, there's no denying that. I know there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's just been Tennessee, Oregon." No. He has been outstanding all season long. However, he has become practically unguardable in these two playoff games against Tennessee and Oregon. 90.8 receiving grade. 13 catches for 290 yards and 4 touchdowns. Keep in mind, Tennessee and Oregon are two of the 30 best teams in the country in terms of coverage grade this year. Oregon's in the top 5, and he went off against Oregon in that Rose Bowl. You combine that with the fact that it's not just Jeremiah Smith. Like you mentioned, Emeka Egbuka is somehow the Robin in this offense. He's a projected first-round pick in the NFL draft. You have a receiving core that pretty much every secondary in college football cannot handle. You can't handle the receiving core, except maybe Texas. Except maybe Texas. Right now, the Longhorns lead the nation with a 92.5 coverage grade. 3 players in their secondary have 85-plus grades. 85-plus. We're talking like elite stuff. And they have 3 players in the secondary with 85-plus grades. Jahdae Barron, Andrew Makuba, and Michael Taft. Texas leads the FBS with a 59.8 passer rating allowed, and they're third in explosive pass rate allowed. Explosive passes are 15-plus yards. What Ohio State's been living off of lately. All those deep bombs to Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. Texas is the 3rd best team in the country at limiting those at only 9% this year. Now, Texas, Jeremiah Smith said before the Oregon game, if you run man coverage on us, good luck. We're going to throw the ball, and we're going to beat you with it. Texas does not run man coverage that much. They only run man coverage 17% of the time. They play about 85 or so percent of the time in zone coverage. But the problem is, Jeremiah Smith is not just killing man coverage. He has 763 receiving yards against zone coverage this year. The only Power 4 receiver that has more receiving yards against zone coverage is Heisman Trophy winner Travis Hunter. That's it. It's Travis Hunter and then true freshman Jeremiah Smith in terms of how many receiving yards they have against zone coverage. And as a team, Ohio State is the 3rd best receiving grade in America against zone coverage. Not only is this a must-see matchup considering how many freaking superstars are in this? Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, even Cardell Tate's a very, very good pass catcher as well. Will Howard's been playing out of his mind lately. And the other side of the ball, you got Jahdae Barron, you got Michael Taft, you got Andrew Makuba, Malik Muhammad I like a lot as well. Studs everywhere. The pass rush for Texas will be huge in this game as well. Colin Simmons and guys like that. Not only is it just awesome to watch in terms of how many superstars there are, it could very well decide the game and who goes on to the national title game. Just how much can Texas limit look like an unstoppable receiving corps lately, but also Texas has by far, in my opinion, the best secondary in college football.
Yeah, no, and I think if they win this game, we are pretty much just going to declare them the best defense in college football. And you mentioned about preventing explosive plays against 10-plus yard targets this year, 3rd in the nation in coverage grade behind Colorado and Minnesota. I mean, this is the company they're keeping, and it's a lot of, you mentioned it's zone heavy, it's a lot of 3 and 4 and switching back between them, and I'd be curious if they're looking to sit back even further, and how much do they trust Alfred Collins and those guys up front to stop the run. Maybe it's just a front 6, because you need all the help you can get. Right, I think there's 3 things that would worry me if I'm Texas on defense. Aside from all the nonsense I ranted about earlier, it's can we support the run without the safeties? Can we leave especially Makuba on the back end to help in coverage, because he's usually the one flying up there making tackles. He's had such a great year. Can we support the run without the safeties? Can we prevent yards after catch? Because I think a lot of times against these zone defenses, and Ohio State, look, we saw Jeremiah Smith. He's able to take off on you after the catch, too. We saw it on the first touchdown where he takes a slide route and he just goes 50 yards like it's nothing and just striding it out to the goal line, right? And 3, against these zone looks is where we start to get a lot of the looks. Remember I've talked about lately in the season where Ohio State's lining up Smith and Egbuka on the same side of the formation? A lot of that is to just get zone defenders flying towards one or the other, and then the second guy is left wide open, right? And it's a whole there's a lot of problems that Texas has to deal with. And again, I think if they do win this game, we're going to sit here and go, okay, that's best defense in the country, because you just stopped that when it was raging hot and everything was working, and all the talent they have too. But I think those would be the 3 goals: stop the run, got to make open field tackles if Ohio State decides to go more conservative. And then just matching up somehow with these formations when they have Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith. I mean, it's hard enough that they're super talented. The fact that the formations help them out now too is just It's ridiculous. And what Chip Kelly's been doing lately in the passing game has just been brilliant. So it's a lot of problems. I think Texas, you might be right. They may be the last team that has a chance to do it. They might be the last. And I know these 2 defenses are really good, but this is the best coverage team in college football this year.
Absolutely. And a lot of people in the chat right now shouting out Donovan Jackson. I want to agree with him. He has been outstanding, especially in these last two playoff games for Ohio State. 78.7 pass blocking grade against Tennessee with that pass rush. And then Oregon, 81.7 pass blocking grade against, again, one of the best pass rushers in college football. So
his draft stock as a guard, I think, has gone way up because of his work at tackle. It sounds funny. He's not going to play tackle in the NFL, but he may actually work his way up, and if he wasn't already, to being the top guard taken in the draft.
And there's so many top elite guards in the NFL that you've seen, like in a pinch, play tackle. Like Zach Martin, I remember, did that.
Elijah Vera Tucker.
Exactly.
Guys like that. I mean, no, he's just a spectacular adjustment. And you get a little bit better with reps, but think about the two defenses he's done it against, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Just ridiculous. Yeah. It's ridiculous edge rushers he's been going against, and against Texas. I know Colin Simmons plays a lot against the right tackle, so he probably won't be lining up against Donovan Jackson a lot, but that matchup, if he does get it, will be a terrific one as well. Ultimately, Dalton, who will win the Cotton Bowl and move on to the national championship game?
I think if I'm Texas and I'm going to win this game, and I know we've seen them be really good all year, and they squeaked it out last week for sure, they need to play front to back their best game.
Yeah.
And I think Quinn Ewers would have to play the best game of his career. I really do, with the way this Ohio State team is rolling. I've got Ohio State 31-24. I just think I need 60 minutes of Quinn Ewers' absolute best, and I need 60 minutes of their defense's absolute best. And I think we did see some breakdowns last week. Now, there was some trick plays and things involved, but against Arizona State, we got to remember, too, they gave up, 31 points in that game to Arizona State?
Yep.
And much of that was late, right? It was 22-6, I think it was, or 24-8. Sorry, it was 24. It was 24-8. This is an animal. Ohio State's an absolute animal right now, and I the way they're playing, you just can't feel comfortable picking against them. And I know Texas, again, their secondary may be the only one. They may be the only one left that can keep up with this the way that it's rolling. And unless they're so dominant in the trenches, especially their defensive line, if their defensive line comes out and dominates, and even with the counter schemes and the new stuff, if they don't let Ohio State's offensive line in the run game get rolling at 7 yards a clip like that, then you have something. Because I still think that's a big advantage they have when you talk about the talent is Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton and those guys up front. But the best parts and the biggest advantages for Texas, they're going to have to be absolutely perfect to win this game, and I just can't pick them to be perfect. Ohio State 31-24.
Yeah, I got Ohio State winning this one as well, 30-21. I think something snapped in Ohio State after that loss to Michigan, the way they've been playing these last two games. They finally look like, against Tennessee and Oregon, the best team in the country, like we thought they could be with their uber-talented roster going into the year. And I agree with you. They're going to need nearly flawless football from Quinn Ewers to win this game. And that's a dangerous proposition to be asking for, considering how much of a roller coaster he's been this year. So I think Ohio State wins the Cotton Bowl and advances to their first national title game since 2020 when they lost to Alabama. So to recap, I have Ohio State against Penn State in the national championship game. Taking a rematch. And you have Ohio State against Notre Dame in the national
Even that was
game.
a little bit of revenge of that. Remember last year, Marcus Freeman and 10 guys on the field, and the end of how that went? I mean...
And remember the coaching blunder for Marcus Freeman in that last year's game. Now he's coaching his ass off right now. I'm sure he wants another. He wants a do-over in that one. Sure.
Absolutely. It was as tight a game. It was as good a game as we watched all of last year. Yeah. Kyle McCord's biggest win last year,
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, Miami.
Well, that was this year, too.
Last year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But listen, really fun semifinals. I didn't even mention at the top, maybe 4 of the most iconic helmets that we have in college football as well. I didn't realize that.
Oh, these are going to be classics.
These are elite, like no logos on that one right there, and then 2 of the most iconic ones over here with Ohio State and Texas. But should be an iconic college football playoff semifinals as well, considering how massive these 4 programs are. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.